"Give me a son and I shall free you," the Duke said, but one night made him her prisoner forever. Rain lashed against the leaded windows of Blackthorn Hall as Lady Seraphina Vale stood before the Duke of Harrington, her slender frame rigid with pride despite the threadbare quality of her morning gown. The gaslight cast sinister shadows across the mahogany-panelled study, illuminating the harsh planes of the Duke's face as he examined the document before him. "Your father's debts are considerable, Lady Vale," he remarked, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "I believe the sum would require 3 lifetimes to repay." Seraphina's fingers tightened around her reticule, the last vestige of finery she possessed. "I am aware of the burden, Your Grace. I have come to request an extension." A murmur rippled through the small gathering of witnesses. The Duke's solicitor, his stern-faced butler, and Lady Althea Durnell, whose presence as a supposed chaperone felt more predatory than protective. The Ton would feast upon this scene for weeks to come, the once celebrated daughter of Earl Vale, reduced to begging before Blackthorn's notorious master. An extension? The Duke's laugh held no warmth. "Tell me, Lady Vale, what collateral do you offer that might inspire such uncharacteristic generosity on my part?" Seraphina raised her chin, refusing to cower. "My brother's health fails with each passing hour. If you could grant us but a fortnight—" "Your brother's condition is of no consequence to me," the Duke interrupted, rising to his imposing height. He circled his massive desk, each step measured, until he stood before her. His gaze traveled from her face to her worn gloves, assessing her as one might appraise livestock. "However, there may be an arrangement that would benefit us both." Lady Althea's fan snapped closed, the sound like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. The Duke's eyes never left Seraphina's face as he delivered his proposal. "Give me a son and I shall free you from all debts. My bloodline requires continuation. Your family requires salvation." The room seemed to tilt beneath Seraphina's feet. "You cannot be suggesting—" "A contract, Lady Vale. 1 month as my Duchess in name and duty. Provide me with an heir, and I shall consider all obligations fulfilled." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Refuse, and I shall have your brother imprisoned for the debts by morning." "You would propose such indecency before witnesses?" Seraphina's voice trembled with outrage. "These are not witnesses, madam," the Duke replied coldly. "These are executors of my will." Lady Althea's painted lips curved into a cruel smile. "How desperate the mighty have fallen. Will you sell yourself for your brother's comfort, Lady Vale?" Seraphina clutched the silver locket at her throat, her mother's final gift. Inside lay a portrait of Ronan, her sweet-faced brother whose consumption would claim him without proper care. Without the medicine, only money could buy. 1 month, the Duke repeated, extending a document, "after which you may depart with your freedom and your family's honor legally restored." Thunder cracked outside, the storm matching the tempest in Seraphina's heart. She stood at the precipice of ruin, peering into an abyss of shame that no proper lady should contemplate. "The contract awaits your signature, Lady Vale," the Duke said, offering his quill like a weapon. "Shall you save your brother, or shall you preserve what remains of your virtue?" With trembling fingers, Seraphina accepted the pen. "Before these witnesses," she whispered, her voice strengthening with each word, "I accept your terms, but know this, though you may claim my body, my soul shall remain mine alone." "I have no interest in your soul," the Duke replied with a dismissive wave, "only in what your womb may provide." The quill scratched against parchment, the sound like shackles closing around Seraphina's future. As she signed, a single tear escaped, falling upon the Duke's seal and marring the crimson wax. "The wedding shall be tomorrow at dawn," the Duke declared. "A special license has already been secured." Lady Althea's laughter tinkled like poisoned bells. "How fortunate that your mourning attire shall serve as bridal garments, Lady Vale. Black becomes you so." Yet even as despair threatened to consume her, Seraphina found an unexpected spark of defiance kindling within her breast. 1 month to endure, 1 month to survive, and then freedom, however tainted it might be. What she could not know, as the contract's ink dried in the flickering gaslight, was that destiny held plans far different from those drafted by mortal hands. The wedding ceremony passed in a blur of whispers and cold formality. No music accompanied Seraphina's walk down the Abbey's ancient stone aisle, only the muffled snickering of the handful of aristocrats the Duke had summoned to witness his conquest. Her black gown, hastily altered to resemble something bridal, dragged behind her like a funeral pall. "A most peculiar match," someone murmured as she passed. "A purchased bride," another replied. Desperation wears a widow's weeds today. The Duke awaited her at the altar, resplendent in midnight blue, his cravat secured with a diamond pin worth more than Seraphina's entire former estate. His face betrayed no emotion, neither triumph nor desire, as the aged vicar joined their hands. "With this ring I thee wed," the Duke intoned mechanically, sliding a heavy gold band onto her finger. The metal felt like ice against her skin, the Harrington crest pressing into her flesh like a brand. When the ceremony concluded, the Duke turned to address the gathering. "I thank you for bearing witness to this union. Lady Harrington and I shall depart immediately for Blackthorn Hall." No celebration followed, no feast or dancing to mark the occasion. The Duke led Seraphina to his waiting carriage, helping her inside with cold courtesy that belied the bargain between them. As they journeyed through rain-slicked streets, Seraphina gazed at the passing landscape through tear-blurred eyes. London's grand mansions gave way to rolling countryside, the distance between her and her former life growing with each turn of the wheels. "Your brother has been moved to the cottage at the edge of my estate," the Duke informed her, breaking the hours-long silence. "A physician attends him daily. You may visit once a week, provided you fulfill your obligations." Seraphina's hands clenched in her lap. "You are most generous, Your Grace," she replied, the words tasting of ash. "I am practical, madam. Nothing more." Night had fallen by the time they reached Blackthorn Hall. The ancestral seat of the Harringtons loomed against the starless sky, its Gothic spires piercing the darkness like accusations. Servants lined the entrance, their faces carefully blank as they greeted their new Duchess. The housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, a severe woman with iron-grey hair and matching disposition, led Seraphina to her chambers. "The master's rooms adjoin yours through that door," she explained, gesturing to a heavy oak portal. "He has instructed that you are to dine alone tonight and prepare yourself for his arrival at midnight." Left alone, Seraphina explored her gilded cage. The Duchess's suite was lavishly appointed with silk draperies, priceless paintings, and furniture crafted by master artisans. A fire roared in the marble hearth, yet failed to warm the chill that had settled in her bones. On the dressing table lay a silver hairbrush engraved with the Harrington crest, alongside crystal bottles of expensive perfume. Beside these sat a small leather case containing a note in the Duke's precise hand, "For the Duchess of Harrington. Wear these tonight." Inside nestled a pair of pearl earrings and a matching necklace, their luster gleaming mockingly in the firelight, gifts not of affection but of ownership. Seraphina turned away, unable to bear their cold beauty. She unpacked her few belongings, arranging them with care: her mother's book of poetry, a miniature portrait of Ronan, and the silver locket that hung ever at her throat. A maid arrived with a tray of untouched supper and assisted her into a nightgown of finest silk, another item provided by her new husband. The garment, though modest in cut, felt like a betrayal against her skin. As midnight approached, Seraphina sat before the vanity, brushing her honey-brown hair until it cascaded down her back in waves. She would not cower. She would endure what must be endured, her thoughts fixed upon her brother's recovery and the freedom that awaited at the contract's end. The mantel clock struck 12, each chime resonating through her chambers like a funeral knell. Moments later, the connecting door opened. The Duke entered, clad in a burgundy dressing gown, his dark hair loosened from its usual severe style. Without the formal attire of daylight, he appeared younger, though no less formidable. "I trust you find your accommodations satisfactory," he said, his eyes sweeping over her with clinical detachment. "They are most comfortable, Your Grace. You will address me as Harrington when we are alone." He moved to the sideboard and poured himself a measure of brandy. "Would you care for a drink to ease your nerves?" Seraphina squared her shoulders. "I require no artificial courage to fulfill our bargain." Something flashed in his eyes, perhaps respect, perhaps irritation. "Very well." He set down his glass untouched. "Shall we proceed with the consummation of our arrangement?" As he approached the bed, Seraphina steeled herself against the coming ordeal. Yet when his fingers brushed against her cheek to extinguish the bedside lamp, an unexpected warmth spread beneath her skin. "1 month," he reminded her, his voice oddly gentle in the sudden darkness, "and then you shall have your freedom." The lamp's flame died, casting the room into shadow, where secrets might be exchanged without witnesses, and where even the coldest hearts might for a moment beat with unexpected warmth. Dawn arrived with pale fingers of light stretching across the rumpled bed linens. Seraphina woke alone, the Duke's absence a relief that loosed the tight knot of tension in her chest. She touched her lips, still tender from kisses that had been neither cruel nor kind, but something far more dangerous, unexpectedly considerate. The night had not been the ordeal she had steeled herself to endure. Instead, in the darkness, the Duke had shown a restraint and attention that bewildered her. His touch, though unfamiliar, had been guided by her responses rather than solely his desire. This unexpected gentleness left her more unsettled than any brutality might have done. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of her new lady's maid, Alice, a petite girl with quick eyes and hands that moved with practiced efficiency as she helped Seraphina dress for the day. "His Grace has requested your presence in the conservatory for breakfast, my lady," Alice informed her, fastening the buttons of a morning gown that had mysteriously appeared in the wardrobe overnight. The exact shade of her eyes fitted precisely to her measurements. "Has the Duke ordered an entire wardrobe for me?" Seraphina asked, fingering the fine lawn fabric. "Yes, my lady. The dressmakers worked through the night." Alice's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's been nothing like it at Blackthorn in living memory." The conservatory stood at the eastern wing of the manor, a cathedral of glass and wrought iron where exotic flowers bloomed in defiance of the English winter. The Duke awaited her at a small table, arranged amongst a grove of orange trees, the scent of their blossoms hanging sweet in the humid air. He rose at her entrance, his countenance as inscrutable as ever. "Good morning, Duchess. I trust you slept well after our exertions." Seraphina felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Quite well, thank you." A footman appeared with silver trays of delicacies, fresh fruits, pastries, and fragrant tea. The Duke dismissed him with a gesture, leaving them in relative privacy among the greenery. "I have news of your brother," he said, pouring tea with his own hand rather than summoning a servant. "The physician reports marked improvement already. The mountain air of the cottage seems to agree with him." Relief washed over Seraphina. "May I visit him today?" "In due course." The Duke's gaze lingered on her face. "First, we must establish the parameters of our arrangement more clearly. I believe the terms were quite explicit, Your Grace." "Harrington," he corrected. "And yes, the legal terms are clear, but there are practicalities to discuss." He set down his cup with deliberate precision. "You will maintain the appearance of a devoted duchess in public. The tongue already whispers about our sudden union. We need not fuel further speculation. As you wish. You will join me for breakfast each morning and dinner each evening. The remainder of your time is your own, save when I require your presence for social obligations." Seraphina nodded, relieved at the prospect of solitude. "You will select new furnishings for the Duchess's wing, which has stood empty since my mother's passing. The current appointments are not to my taste." This unexpected liberty caught her off guard. "You would grant me authority over Blackthorn's interior?" Something like amusement flickered across his features. "I have neither the time nor inclination for such matters. Besides, your family was known for its taste, if not its financial prudence." The barb stung, but Seraphina maintained her composure. "And at night?" His eyes darkened. "You will receive me in your chambers until our arrangement bears fruit or the month concludes. And if I should conceive before the month ends, then you may depart with my gratitude and your family's debts erased, though propriety would suggest remaining until the child's birth can be announced." Seraphina sipped her tea to disguise her disquiet. The prospect of carrying the Duke's child stirred conflicting emotions, repulsion at the clinical arrangement, yet a strange melancholy at the thought of abandoning a babe of her own blood. "You need not fear," the Duke said, misinterpreting her silence. "I shall provide generously for both you and the child. Your comfort will be assured." "I do not seek comfort, Your Grace," she replied, setting down her cup with a clink. "Only freedom." The Duke studied her with unexpected intensity. "Freedom is a luxury few truly possess, Duchess. Even I, with all my wealth and title, am bound by duty and bloodline." For a moment, something vulnerable passed across his face. A fleeting shadow quickly masked. He rose abruptly, straightening his already immaculate jacket. "I have business in the village. The carriage shall be at your disposal, should you wish to explore the grounds. Mrs. Winters will acquaint you with the household staff." Seraphina watched him retreat, his broad shoulders stiff beneath fine tailoring. Only when he had disappeared through the conservatory doors did she allow herself to exhale fully. Later that morning, as she toured the vast manor that was temporarily her domain, Seraphina encountered Lady Althea unexpectedly in the portrait gallery. The woman's presence, like a serpent in a garden, sent a chill down her spine. "How fares our new Duchess?" Althea inquired, her smile sharp as a blade. "Has married life proven satisfactory?" "Lady Althea, I was unaware you remained at Blackthorn." The Duke has graciously extended my visit. Althea circled Serafina slowly, appraising her day dress with critical eyes. How quickly you've adapted to your position, from debtor's daughter to duchess in a single night. The circumstances of my marriage are not your concern. Oh, but they are the concern of all society, my dear. A mourning woman wed with such haste, tongues will wag. Althea paused before the portrait of the Duke's mother, a stern-faced beauty with his same penetrating gaze. They might even suggest that the Duke's sudden need for an heir springs not from duty, but necessity. Serafina frowned. What do you mean? Merely that men of his station often find themselves compromised. A child born within wedlock, however hastily arranged, raises fewer questions than one born without. Althea's fan flicked open, concealing her smirk. But perhaps I speak of matters beyond your understanding. Before Serafina could respond, the sharp rap of boots against marble announced the Duke's return. He entered the gallery, his expression darkening at the tableau before him. Lady Althea, he acknowledged coldly, I was unaware you and my wife had scheduled an audience. We encountered each other by chance, Your Grace, Althea replied, dipping into a perfect curtsy. I was merely welcoming the Duchess to her new home. The Duke's eyes narrowed. My carriage shall take you to London tomorrow morning. Your presence is required by your aunt, I'm told. Althea's smile faltered. But surely, my decision is final. He offered his arm to Serafina. Come, Duchess, there are matters requiring our attention. As he led her away, Serafina sensed the fury radiating from Althea's rigid form. The Duke's hand covered hers, warm and strangely protective as it rested upon his sleeve. You would do well to avoid Lady Althea's company, he murmured as they descended the grand staircase. Her tongue carries more poison than a viper's fang. She implied your urgency for an heir stems from impropriety. The Duke halted, turning to face her with an intensity that stole her breath. And do you believe her insinuations? Serafina met his gaze unflinchingly. I know nothing of you, save what society whispers and what our contract states. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight easing of his perpetual frown. Then perhaps, Duchess, it is time we became better acquainted. That night, when he came to her chambers, there was a different quality to his approach, less the fulfillment of obligation, more the exploration of possibility. And when he whispered her name in the darkness, Serafina found herself responding not with resignation, but with a treacherous spark of desire. The days at Blackthorn unfolded with strange rhythm, each morning bringing Serafina further from the woman who had signed her freedom away beneath gaslight and desperation. Lady Althea had departed as commanded, though not before casting venomous glances that promised future retribution. 1 week into her marriage, Serafina received permission to visit her brother. The cottage, nestled among ancient oaks at the estate's edge, proved a charming surprise. Airy rooms filled with sunlight, a garden visible from Ronan's windows, and a small library stocked with volumes suited to his scholarly interests. Sarah, Ronan greeted her, his voice stronger than she remembered, his thin cheeks showing a hint of healthy color. You look different. She embraced him, careful of his frailty. The mountain air has improved you already, and marriage has transformed you, it seems. His keen eyes studied her face. Is he cruel to you? The truth, sister. I'll not be placated with gentle falsehoods. Serafina adjusted the coverlet across his legs, buying moments to compose her answer. He is not what I expected. He purchased you to breed an heir, Ronan said bluntly, his scholar's directness undiminished by illness. Such a man cannot possess humanity, yet he has shown consideration where none was required. She smoothed her skirts, avoiding his penetrating gaze. The physician attends you daily. Your medicines are the finest available. These comforts exceed our arrangement. Ronan's fingers found hers, surprisingly warm. And at night, sister? What price do you pay for my recovery? A price I chose willingly, she whispered, and one less terrible than I feared. The admission startled her, a truth she had scarcely acknowledged to herself. The Duke's nightly visits had evolved from dutiful coupling into something that left her breathless and confused. His hands, once clinical in their exploration, now lingered with appreciation. His lips sought places beyond utility, drawing responses that shamed her with their eagerness. There is something you're not telling me, Ronan pressed. She forced a reassuring smile. Only that you need not worry. In 3 more weeks, our debts shall be cleared, and we may begin anew. Returning to the manor through gardens awakening to spring, Serafina found the Duke awaiting her beside the reflecting pool, his tall figure silhouetted against afternoon light. "How fares your brother?" he inquired, falling into step beside her. "Much improved, thanks to your generosity." She hesitated, then added, "He was surprised by the quality of his accommodations. Did you expect I would house him in squalor while demanding your services?" A shadow crossed his features. "Whatever you believe of me, Duchess, I am not entirely without honor." "Your reputation suggests otherwise," she replied, then bit her lip at her own boldness. Rather than anger, his response was a raised eyebrow. "And what reputation is that?" "They call you the Iron Duke. Cold, unyielding, merciless in business and personal affairs alike. All qualities that built Blackthorn's fortunes when my father nearly gambled them away." His voice hardened. "Her fate not dissimilar to your own family's demise." Serafina flinched. "My father was not a gambler. He was a dreamer whose investments proved unfortunate. A charitable description for financial recklessness that left his children destitute." The Duke paused, his expression softening fractionally. "Forgive me. It was not my intention to malign your father's memory." This unexpected apology caught Serafina off guard. "You surprise me, Your Grace." "Harrington," he corrected automatically. Then, with a hint of wry humor, "And how have I managed this feat? Most men of your station would feel no compunction about disparaging a debtor. Most men of my station have not witnessed the consequences of a father's failings firsthand." Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes before vanishing behind practiced reserve. "Will you walk with me? There is a matter I wish to discuss." They strolled in silence until reaching a secluded rose garden, the buds still tightly furled against spring's uncertain warmth. Here, sheltered by high yew hedges, the Duke spoke with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I have received an invitation to Lord Pembroke's hunting weekend. As my Duchess, your presence is expected." Serafina's stomach tightened. "A public appearance?" "The first test of our arrangement's credibility," he confirmed. "Pembroke's gatherings attract the highest echelons of society. Our marriage must withstand scrutiny. Will Lady Althea attend?" His jaw tightened. "Undoubtedly, which is why we must present a united front." He turned to face her directly. "Can you play the role of besotted bride convincingly, Duchess?" "I am no actress, sir." "Then we must give the ton something to believe." His voice lowered, intimate, despite the open air surrounding them. "We have become somewhat familiar with one another's bodies. Perhaps we might extend that familiarity to our public personas." Heat bloomed across Serafina's cheeks. "You suggest we pretend affection? I suggest we present the appearance of a marriage based on more than financial transaction." His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently tucked a wind-blown strand of hair behind her ear, a liberty that sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "Lady Althea will spread poison regardless. We must provide the antidote." That evening, a package arrived in Serafina's chambers. Gowns for the weekend gathering, each more exquisite than anything she had owned, even in her family's prosperous days. Sapphire silk, emerald velvet, cream lace, colors chosen to complement her complexion and hair, styles designed to announce her status as Harrington's Duchess. As Alice arranged them in the wardrobe, she chattered about the honor of being invited to Pembroke's estate. "All the finest families attend, my lady. His Grace hasn't accepted an invitation in 3 seasons, not since—" She stopped abruptly, her cheeks flushing. "Since when, Alice?" Serafina pressed. The maid busied herself with straightening an already perfect row of shoes. "It's not my place to gossip, my lady. Yet you've already begun. Please continue." Alice lowered her voice to a whisper. "Not since Lady Elizabeth jilted him for the Earl of Westmoreland. They were betrothed for a year when she broke the engagement most publicly." "Lady Elizabeth?" The name stirred a vague memory. "The Duke was engaged." "Oh yes, my lady. The match was considered perfect. She brought connections to the royal family. He provided the fortune her family lacked." Alice's eyes darted nervously toward the door. "They say he loved her truly, though he showed it strangely. After she left him, he changed, grew colder, harder. The Iron Duke, they began calling him then." This revelation settled like a stone in Serafina's chest. The Duke's past heartbreak explained much. His coldness, his transactional approach to marriage, his insistence on an heir without emotional entanglement. When he came to her that night, Serafina viewed him through this new lens of understanding. As his body joined with hers in what had become a strangely tender ritual, she found herself wondering if the warmth in his touch might be the embers of a heart not entirely turned to iron after all. "You are quiet tonight," he murmured against her temple, his breathing still uneven from their exertions. "I was thinking of Pembroke's gathering," she answered, not wishing to reveal her newfound knowledge. What shall I say when they ask how we came to wed so suddenly? His arm tightened around her waist, drawing her closer against his chest. Tell them I could not bear to wait once I had found my Duchess. A romantic falsehood. Perhaps. His voice held an unfamiliar note, something almost wistful. Or perhaps the explanation need not be entirely false. Before she could question his meaning, his lips found hers in a kiss, unlike those that had come before, lingering, seeking, tasting of possibility rather than obligation. And when sleep finally claimed her, Serafina dreamed not of freedom, but of hands that held rather than possessed. Pembroke's country estate sprawled across rolling hills, its Palladian facade gleaming white against spring-green lawns. Carriages lined the circular drive, disgorging aristocracy in a parade of silks and jewels that dazzled the eye. The Duke's landau, drawn by 4 perfectly matched greys, drew appreciative murmurs as it approached the main entrance. "Remember," the Duke murmured as a footman opened their door, "you are the Duchess of Harrington. Let no one make you feel unworthy of the title." Serafina straightened her shoulders beneath the sapphire silk gown that matched the ducal colours. "I was born Lady Vale before misfortune struck. I know how to conduct myself in society." A faint smile touched his lips. "Indeed you do. That is precisely why you are here." He offered his arm as they ascended the marble steps, his posture possessive in a way that sent onlookers' eyebrows arching with speculation. Serafina felt the weight of every gaze, assessing, judging, measuring the authenticity of their sudden union. Lord Pembroke greeted them with calculated enthusiasm. "Harrington and the new Duchess." His eyes lingered too long on Serafina's figure. "Society has been positively famished for details of your whirlwind romance. Some matters are too precious for public consumption," the Duke replied smoothly, his hand coming to rest protectively at the small of her back. They moved through gilded reception rooms, navigating a sea of curious nobles whose hushed conversations paused at their approach. Serafina recognized many faces from London seasons past, former acquaintances who had evaporated when her family's fortunes crumbled, now eager to re-establish connection with the new Duchess of Harrington. "Lady Serafina, forgive me, Duchess," trilled Lady Montgomery, who had once cut her directly on Bond Street. "You must tell us how you captured our most elusive bachelor. We had quite despaired of him ever marrying again after—" She stopped, flushing. "After I recognized her worth when others were too blind to see it," the Duke interjected smoothly, his fingers intertwined with Serafina's, his thumb tracing small circles against her palm. Some treasures revealed themselves only to the deserving eye. The unexpected poetry of his response left Serafina momentarily speechless. She glanced up to find his gaze upon her, something unreadable swimming in its depths. The gathering proceeded to dinner, where Serafina found herself seated beside the elderly Duchess of Montfort, a notorious gossip whose tongue had ended more than one promising debut. "Such a fascinating match," the old woman remarked, peering at Serafina through a jewelled lorgnette. "The ton wagered Harrington would choose someone with more substantial connections." "Perhaps His Grace values qualities beyond pedigree and fortune," Serafina replied, maintaining her composure despite the implied slight. "Indeed? And what qualities might those be, my dear? You are comely enough, I suppose, though hardly a diamond of the first water." Before Serafina could formulate a response that wouldn't constitute a social catastrophe, she felt warm fingers at her nape, just above her gown's neckline. The Duke had stretched his arm along the back of her chair, his touch deliberate and intimate. "My wife possesses intelligence, dignity, and a strength of character rarely found in ballrooms or drawing rooms," he stated, loud enough for nearby diners to hear. "I would sooner have her sharp mind than another's empty beauty or hollow laughter." A hush fell over their section of the table. The Duchess of Montfort's mouth opened and closed, like a fish suddenly deprived of water. "How fortunate I am," Serafina managed, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "to have found a husband who values substance over mere appearance." The Duke's eyes held hers for a heartbeat longer than propriety dictated. "The fortune, Duchess, is entirely mine." As the evening progressed, Serafina observed a peculiar pattern. Whenever conversation veered toward their hasty marriage or her family's circumstances, the Duke intervened with protective precision, redirecting attention or silencing inquiry with a well-placed comment. He remained physically close, his hand frequently finding the small of her back, his head bending attentively when she spoke. They retired earlier than most guests, climbing the grand staircase with deliberate dignity while whispers swirled in their wake. The Duke escorted her to the connecting door between their assigned chambers, lingering in the doorway with uncharacteristic hesitation. "You performed admirably tonight," he said, loosening his cravat with one hand. "The Duchess of Montfort has not been rendered speechless since the Prince Regent's day." "Your intervention was timely," Serafina acknowledged, though perhaps overly gallant given our arrangement. His expression shuttered. "Would you prefer I allow them to disparage you openly? I merely observe that your defense exceeded what our contract requires. Our contract requires a convincing performance." He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something distinctly his own, enveloping her. "Does it trouble you that I might find the role less burdensome than anticipated?" Serafina's pulse quickened. "We have an agreement, Your Grace. 1 month, then freedom." It would be unwise to confuse performance with reality. Something like hurt flashed across his features before his customary reserve reasserted itself. "Of course. Forgive my presumption." He bowed formally. "Good night, Duchess." He withdrew to his own chamber, leaving Serafina to wonder why his departure felt like loss rather than relief. The next morning brought a fox hunt for the gentlemen and a garden tour for the ladies. Serafina walked among exotic blooms, half listening to Lady Pembroke's horticultural commentary, while her thoughts remained tangled in the previous night's exchange. "The Duchess appears distracted," observed a familiar, poisonous voice. Lady Althea had materialized beside her, resplendent in burgundy silk that complemented her golden beauty. "Perhaps the rigors of married life have proven exhausting." "Lady Althea," Serafina acknowledged, with cool civility. "I had not realized you numbered among Lady Pembroke's intimates." "Oh, I number among many circles you have yet to penetrate, despite your elevated title." Althea's smile was razor-sharp. How curious that Harrington chose this particular gathering to debut his purchased bride. Several nearby ladies gasped softly at the blatant insult. Serafina felt her cheeks warm, but maintained her composure. "I find nothing curious about a husband wishing to introduce his wife to society." "Nothing curious at all," Althea agreed with venomous sweetness, "except perhaps the timing. Lady Elizabeth returns from her Italian tour next week, you see. One might almost suspect Harrington arranged this hasty marriage to save face before his former fiancée reappears." The barb struck with precision, finding the exact junction of Serafina's newfound confidence and lingering insecurity. She had known nothing of Lady Elizabeth's return. Could the Duke's sudden need for an heir, for a wife, stem from wounded pride rather than practical necessity? "You seem remarkably concerned with His Grace's motivations," Serafina observed, struggling to keep her voice level. "One might almost suspect personal disappointment." Althea's eyes narrowed. "I merely find it fascinating that a man known for his impeccable judgment would bind himself to a penniless nobody whose only value lies in her breeding capacity." The crude assessment, delivered in cultured tones, hung in the air like a slap. Serafina's fingers tightened around her parasol handle until her knuckles whitened. "You mistake His Grace's character entirely," she replied, surprised by the fierce protectiveness that surged through her. "And you gravely underestimate mine." Before Althea could respond, a commotion from the returning hunting party drew their attention. The gentlemen approached across the lawn, many still mounted with the Duke at their center. He rode a massive black stallion, controlling the powerful animal with effortless grace. Sunlight gleamed on his dark hair and broad shoulders as he dismounted in one fluid motion. His eyes found Serafina immediately, as though drawn by some invisible thread. With purposeful strides, he crossed to where she stood, took her gloved hand, and pressed it to his lips. "I find I cannot bear even a morning's separation from my Duchess," he announced, loud enough for all to hear. "The hunt held no joy without you beside me." The naked possessiveness in his gaze sent heat coursing through Serafina's veins. Lady Althea's face contorted with poorly concealed fury. "Your devotion does you credit, Your Grace," Serafina replied, acutely aware of their audience. "Though I confess, I too found the hours long in your absence." He offered his arm, and as she took it, he leaned close to whisper, "Whatever venom Lady Althea has spewed, disregard it. She speaks from jealousy, not truth." "She mentioned Lady Elizabeth's imminent return," Serafina murmured back, "a detail you neglected to share." His body tensed against hers, a coincidence irrelevant to our arrangement. "Is it?" she pressed. "Or did you require a duchess before your former fiancé's reappearance?" The Duke's jaw tightened. "We will discuss this privately." His voice dropped lower still, a breath against her ear that sent unwelcome shivers down her spine. "For now, remember that you are my wife, whatever the circumstances of our union, and I protect what is mine." The possessive declaration should have offended her. Instead, it kindled a warmth that spread through her chest, unwanted yet undeniable. As they rejoined the gathering, Serafina found herself playing her role with increasing conviction, responding to the Duke's attentions with a naturalness that blurred the line between performance and truth. That night, when he came to her, their coupling held a desperate intensity that transcended their arrangement, as though both sought to prove something neither dared name aloud. The return to Blackthorn brought no respite from the confusion that plagued Serafina's heart. If anything, the manor's familiar walls only heightened her awareness of how quickly the temporary had begun to feel permanent. 2 weeks into their month-long contract, she found herself adopting the rhythms of the estate as though she had always belonged there, consulting with the housekeeper each morning, walking the gardens at dusk, anticipating the Duke's return from his business affairs with an eagerness that frightened her. Most disturbing were the nights. What had begun as duty had transformed into desire so potent it left her breathless. The Duke, Harrington as she now thought of him in private moments, approached her bed with increasing tenderness, his hands mapping her body with reverence rather than ownership. Sometimes he lingered after their passion was spent, speaking softly of his childhood at Blackthorn, or asking about her own memories, creating an intimacy far more dangerous than physical union. One rainy afternoon, while seeking refuge from her thoughts in the library, Serafina discovered a hidden alcove behind astronomical charts. There, tucked away from casual view, hung a portrait of a woman with golden hair and cold blue eyes, beautiful in the conventional manner prized by society, yet lacking warmth despite the artist's flattering brush. "Lady Elizabeth Rothwell," came the Duke's voice from behind her. "Now Countess of Westmoreland." Serafina startled, turning to find him watching her with an unreadable expression. "Forgive me, I did not mean to pry." "There is nothing to forgive. You are mistress of this house, however temporarily." He approached, stopping beside her to gaze at the portrait. "I should have removed it years ago. Why didn't you?" "Perhaps as a reminder." His voice held no emotion. Of trust misplaced and lessons painfully learned, Serafina studied the painted face, searching for what might have captured his heart. "She is very beautiful. Beauty without substance." His laugh held no humor. "I was younger then, and more susceptible to appearances. She professed love while negotiating better terms with Westmoreland behind my back. That must have been painful for you." "Pain suggests attachment. I felt only disappointment." He turned from the portrait to face her. "A business arrangement much like our own, though she pretended otherwise until a more advantageous offer presented itself. The comparison stung more than it should have. Then we are alike, she and I, both engaged to you through transaction rather than affection." Something flashed in his eyes, anger perhaps or frustration. "You are nothing alike. She offered false sentiment to secure advantage. You made no pretense about your motivations. Honesty being my sole virtue?" "Hardly your sole virtue, Duchess." His gaze softened, "but one I have come to value greatly." The intimacy of the moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken possibilities. Serafina broke it first, turning back to the portrait. "Will you remove it now that she returns to London?" "It shall be gone before sunset," he promised, then hesitated. "Her return holds no significance for me, Serafina. I would have you believe that." The use of her given name, so rare from his lips, sent warmth spreading through her chest. Before she could respond, a footman appeared at the library entrance. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace, but Mr. Vale's condition has worsened. The physician requests the Duchess's presence immediately." Fear clutched at Serafina's heart. Without waiting for the Duke's permission, she gathered her skirts and rushed toward the door. His voice halted her momentarily. "Take my horse, he's faster than the carriage. I'll follow shortly." The cottage that had seemed so peaceful days before now felt oppressive with dread. Ronan lay pale against white linens, his breathing labored, his skin burning with fever. The physician, a grave-faced man named Dr. Thorne, spoke in hushed tones as Serafina clutched her brother's hand. "The improvement we witnessed was temporary," he explained. "The disease has advanced to his lungs. I've administered laudanum for the pain, but there must be something more to be done," Serafina interrupted, desperation threading her voice. "I fear we have exhausted conventional treatments, Your Grace." His use of her title felt hollow in the face of such helplessness. "Perhaps prayer would bring comfort now." Ronan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Sarah?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm here," she assured him, forcing steadiness into her tone. "Rest now. Save your strength." "The Duke!" he managed before a coughing spasm seized him. "Shh! Don't concern yourself with him." Ronan's fingers tightened weakly around hers. He was kind, visited me, when you couldn't. This revelation stunned her. The Duke came to see you, many times. Ronan's eyes drifted closed, brought books, discussed philosophy, not what I expected. Before Serafina could question further, the cottage door opened to admit the Duke himself, rain-soaked and grim-faced. He conferred briefly with Dr. Thorne in the doorway, their voices too low for her to hear, before approaching the bedside. "I've sent for specialists from London and Edinburgh," he informed her quietly. "They shall arrive by morning." Serafina looked up at him, tears threatening. "Why did you not tell me you visited him? It seemed unnecessary to mention." He shifted uncomfortably. "Your brother is an intelligent young man. His insights on Kant are quite remarkable." A weak laugh came from the bed. "Flattery, Your Grace." The Duke's expression softened as he addressed Ronan directly. "Merely truth, sir. Our discussion on the categorical imperative remains unfinished. I expect you to recover sufficiently to continue it." Something passed between the two men, an understanding that excluded, yet comforted Serafina. She watched in wonder as the Duke, the cold, calculating man who had purchased her virtue, placed a gentle hand on her brother's shoulder with genuine concern. "Rest now," he commanded softly. "Your sister and I shall remain until you're stronger." They maintained vigil through the night, Serafina at Ronan's bedside, while the Duke arranged accommodations for the specialists and consulted with Dr. Thorne on experimental treatments. Dawn broke with pale fingers of light when Ronan's fever finally broke, his breathing easing into natural rhythm. Only then did Serafina allow herself to be led to an adjacent room where a makeshift bed had been prepared. "You should rest," the Duke urged, his own exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "The worst has passed, but your brother needs your strength in the coming days." "Why did you do this?" she asked, too tired for pretense. "Our arrangement doesn't require such extraordinary measures for Ronan's care." He looked away, his profile sharp against the morning light. "Perhaps I tired of being the villain in this tale." "You were never truly that," she admitted softly, "merely a man protecting his interests." "My interests have evolved." His voice held a vulnerability she had never heard before. "Rest now, Serafina. We shall speak more when you've recovered your strength." As he turned to leave, she caught his hand impulsively. "Cassian." His given name felt foreign yet right upon her lips. "Thank you." Something unreadable flashed across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. He raised her fingers to his lips, pressing a kiss that lingered longer than courtesy required. "Sleep, Duchess," he murmured against her skin. "I shall watch over what is precious to you." Only when the door closed behind him did Serafina realize a fundamental truth in the calculus of her heart. The scales had shifted. Freedom, once her sole desire, now competed with feelings she dared not name, feelings for a man who had purchased her body, but somehow, against all reason, begun to claim her soul. The specialists arrived with the morning mist, 3 physicians bearing experimental treatments and cautious optimism. For 3 days, Serafina divided her time between Ronan's sickbed and brief respites at the manor, where servants whispered behind their hands about the Duke's unprecedented devotion to his wife's brother. "His Grace has not left the cottage for more than an hour since the crisis began," Mrs. Winters informed her, as Serafina changed into a fresh gown on the 4th morning. "The household has never witnessed such personal involvement in a tenant's welfare." "My brother is hardly a common tenant," Serafina replied, though the observation troubled her. The Duke's behavior extended far beyond their contractual arrangement, beyond even what might be expected from a man cultivating appearances. When she returned to the cottage, she found Cassian reading aloud from a philosophical text, while Ronan listened with alert interest, his complexion markedly improved. The domestic tableau struck her with unexpected force. This powerful man, who commanded estates and industries, patiently engaging with her scholarly brother, as though nothing were more important than their discourse. Kant suggests that morality is founded on reason, not sentiment, Cassian was saying. Yet I find myself questioning whether duty without feeling can truly be virtue. "Perhaps," Ronan replied, his voice stronger than it had been in days. "True virtue lies in the harmony between duty and inclination, when what we ought to do aligns with what we desire to do." "A dangerous proposition," Cassian murmured, his eyes lifting to meet Serafina's as she entered. Something intimate and unspoken passed between them before he closed the book. "Your sister returns to us, and I have monopolized your strength with philosophy." "The best medicine," Ronan insisted. "Far better than the bitter concoctions they force upon me hourly." Dr. Thorne appeared from the adjoining room, satisfaction evident in his bearing. "Those concoctions, young man, have produced remarkable improvement. The specialists believe the crisis has truly passed, though recovery will require patience." Relief washed through Serafina like a cleansing tide. "He will live, then? With proper care and continued treatment, he may yet enjoy many years." The doctor glanced toward the Duke. "The experimental methods your Grace procured have proven most efficacious." Cassian waved away the credit. It was merely a matter of resources properly applied. When they departed the cottage that evening, leaving Ronan peacefully sleeping under the physician's watchful eye, a new silence settled between them. Not the strained formality of their early days, but something weighted with unacknowledged truths. The Duke's hand found hers as they walked through twilight gardens, his grip warm and certain. "3 weeks have passed," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Our arrangement approaches its conclusion." Serafina's heart constricted painfully. "Yes. Have you considered what you will do once you're free?" He kept his gaze fixed forward, his profile carved in shadow. "Where you might go." The question pierced her with unexpected sorrow. In her single-minded focus on surviving their bargain, she had scarcely contemplated what would follow. Freedom, so desperately desired, now loomed as an uncertain wilderness. "I had thought perhaps to take Ronan to Bath for his continued recovery," she answered slowly, "though that plan seems less necessary given the care he receives here. He is welcome to remain at the cottage as long as necessary." Cassian hesitated, then added with studied casualness, "As are you." Serafina halted beneath a blossoming cherry tree, its petals drifting down like pale snow around them. "That was not our agreement. Agreements can be renegotiated." He turned to face her fully, his expression vulnerable in a way she had never witnessed, particularly when circumstances change. "What circumstances have changed, Your Grace?" She needed to hear him speak the truth that hovered between them, undefined, yet unmistakable. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs gently tracing her cheekbones. "Everything," he whispered. "Everything has changed, Serafina." The kiss that followed was unlike any they had shared. Not a seal upon a contract, nor a prelude to duty, but a confession without words. His lips sought hers with reverent hunger, as though she were water after endless drought. Serafina found herself responding with equal fervor, her arms winding around his neck, drawing him closer until the boundary between them seemed to dissolve. When they finally parted, breathless and trembling, he pressed his forehead against hers. "Stay," he murmured, "not as my purchased bride, but as my chosen duchess, my partner, my—" The word he could not speak hung between them, fragile as the cherry blossoms falling around their shoulders. Before Serafina could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats shattered the moment. A rider appeared on the garden path, his livery bearing the crest of the Earl of Westmoreland. He dismounted with a formal bow. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace. I bear an urgent message from the Countess." Cassian's expression closed like a door slamming shut. He accepted the sealed letter with rigid courtesy, dismissing the messenger before breaking the wax with impatient fingers. As he read, his face drained of color. "What is it?" Serafina asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "Elizabeth requests an audience." His voice had returned to the cold precision she had almost forgotten. "She arrives at Blackthorn tomorrow. For what purpose?" "She does not specify." He folded the letter with mechanical precision. "Though I imagine Lady Althea has ensured she knows of our marriage." Serafina struggled to master her racing thoughts. "Will you receive her?" "I must. Westmoreland's support is crucial to legislation affecting our northern properties." His gaze softened as it returned to her face. "This changes nothing between us, Serafina." But something had changed. She could feel it in the sudden distance between them, in the way his shoulders squared with renewed formality. The man who had held her with such vulnerability moments before had retreated behind the Duke's impenetrable facade. That night, for the first time since their wedding, he did not come to her chamber. Serafina lay awake until dawn, her thoughts circling like vultures around one terrible possibility. That Lady Althea had spoken truth at Pembroke's gathering. Perhaps she had been merely a shield, a convenient wife acquired to protect wounded pride before Lady Elizabeth's return. Morning brought no clarity, only the suffocating weight of uncertainty. Serafina dressed with particular care, selecting a gown of deep emerald silk that highlighted her eyes and accentuated the honey gold of her hair. If she must face her husband's former fiancé, she would do so with dignity intact. The Countess of Westmoreland arrived precisely at noon, her carriage an ostentatious display of wealth and position. Serafina watched from the drawing-room window as the golden-haired woman from the portrait descended, her beauty undiminished by the years, her bearing regal despite her lesser title. "Her ladyship is being shown to the blue salon," Mrs. Winters informed her. "His Grace awaits your presence before receiving her." Serafina found Cassian standing before the fireplace, tension evident in every line of his body. He turned at her entrance, his eyes widening slightly as they took in her appearance. "You look magnificent," he said softly. "Thank you." She clasped her trembling hands before her. "Shall we receive your guest?" "Our guest," he corrected. "And yes, though I would have you know that whatever her purpose, my position remains unchanged. What I asked of you yesterday I ask still." Before she could respond, the doors opened to admit Lady Elizabeth. The Countess swept into the room like a conquering queen, her silk skirts whispering against priceless carpets, her golden beauty as cold and perfect as a statue carved from marble. "Cassian," she greeted with practiced warmth, "how kind of you to receive me on such short notice." Her gaze slid to Serafina, assessing and dismissing in a single glance. "And this must be your bride." "Lady Elizabeth," the Duke acknowledged with formal correctness. "May I present her Grace, the Duchess of Harrington?" Serafina curtsied with precision, meeting the Countess's ice-blue eyes without flinching. "We are honored by your visit, Lady Elizabeth. I'm certain you are." The Countess settled onto a settee, arranging her skirts with deliberate grace. "Though I confess the news of your marriage came as quite a shock. One hears such fascinating rumors about its precipitous nature. I was unaware that my personal affairs remained of interest to you, madam." Cassian's voice could have frosted glass. "Particularly given your own happy circumstances." Elizabeth laughed lightly. "Oh, Cassian, we need not maintain this pretense of formality. We shared too much for such distance." The intimate presumption sent a spike of jealousy through Serafina's heart. She maintained her composure with effort, taking a seat beside her husband, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "What brings you to Blackthorn, Lady Elizabeth?" she inquired with pointed politeness. "Surely not merely to offer belated congratulations?" The Countess's smile tightened. "Actually, I come with news that may affect the Duke directly." She turned to Cassian, her expression softening to calculated vulnerability. "My husband's health has declined precipitously. The physicians give him months at most." "I am sorry to hear it," Cassian replied, though his tone held little sympathy. "Your kindness was always your most endearing quality." Elizabeth leaned forward, her voice dropping to an intimate murmur. "When he passes, I shall find myself in need of protection once more. I thought perhaps we might discuss the future, for old time's sake." The brazen proposition hung in the air like poisoned perfume. Serafina felt rather than saw her husband stiffen beside her. "I fear any discussion of your future must exclude me entirely," he stated with dangerous calm. "My obligations lie elsewhere now." Elizabeth's gaze flicked dismissively to Serafina. "Come now, Cassian. We both know the nature of such hasty arrangements. Lady Althea has shared the most fascinating details about your transaction." Rage flared in Serafina's chest, not at the exposure of their bargain, but at this woman's presumption that it rendered their marriage meaningless. Before Cassian could respond, she placed her hand atop his with deliberate possession. "How fortunate that what began as necessity has blossomed into something far more precious," she declared, meeting the Countess's gaze directly. "His Grace has given me his name, his protection, and his heart, gifts I value above all others. What began as duty has become love, Lady Elizabeth, a transformation I suspect you have never experienced." The Countess's face flushed with anger. "You mistake your position entirely." "I think not," Cassian interrupted, his fingers intertwining with Serafina's. "My wife speaks nothing but truth. What began as an arrangement has indeed transformed into something I never thought to find again." He turned to Serafina, his eyes filled with an emotion that stole her breath. "Love was not part of our contract, yet it has become the only clause that matters." The public declaration, spoken before the very woman who had once broken his heart, left Serafina momentarily speechless. Elizabeth rose with barely concealed fury, her composure cracking beneath the weight of rejection. "You would choose this purchased bride over what we shared?" she demanded. "With gratitude for being spared the greatest mistake of my life," Cassian confirmed, rising to stand beside Serafina. "Your carriage awaits, Lady Elizabeth. I wish you good fortune in your widowhood, and in finding a gentleman willing to overlook your history of advantageous attachments. When the Countess had departed in a flurry of outraged dignity, Cassian turned to Serafina with naked vulnerability. "Forgive me for not coming to you last night. I feared you might believe her arrival changed things between us." "Didn't it?" Serafina whispered. "The timing of our marriage, the haste, it all supports Lady Althea's insinuations. I married you because I required an heir," he acknowledged, "but I fell in love with you because you reminded me what it means to have a heart." He knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. "Our contract ends in 1 week. When it does, I would offer you a new one, not of obligation, but of choice." The week that followed passed in a dreamlike state, suspended between the contract that bound them and the promise of what might follow. By unspoken agreement, they did not speak of Lady Elizabeth's visit, or the declaration it had prompted. Instead, they moved through their days with a new awareness of each other, sharing meals, visiting Ronan, walking the grounds in companionable silence. At night, Cassian came to her as always, but their coupling had transformed into something that transcended physical desire. Each touch, each whispered endearment, seemed to ask a question neither dared voice aloud. Would she stay when duty no longer required it? On the morning of their contract's final day, Serafina woke alone, her hand seeking Cassian's warmth, only to find empty sheets. A letter rested on his pillow, sealed with the Harrington crest. With trembling fingers, she broke the wax to read, "Serafina, today marks the conclusion of our arrangement. As promised, your family's debts are erased, and your brother's care is assured regardless of your decision. Your freedom, so long desired, is yours. I await you in the East Garden at noon. There I shall honor our contract's end, and if you are willing, propose its replacement. Until then, know that whatever choice you make, my heart remains yours, Cassian." The elegant script blurred as tears filled her eyes. Freedom, once her only goal, now seemed hollow compared to what she might lose in claiming it. Yet doubt lingered like morning mist. Did she truly know the man she had come to love, or merely the face he had chosen to show her? Could a union founded in transaction truly transform into lasting devotion? She dressed with care, selecting a gown the color of spring leaves, a symbol of renewal rather than mourning. As the mantel clock chimed 11, a knock at her door announced Alice with a curious parcel. "From His Grace," the maid explained, presenting a small chest of polished rosewood. "He instructed me to deliver it precisely at this hour." Inside, Serafina found her mother's silver locket, the one she had pawned to pay for Ronan's medicines before approaching the Duke. Beside it lay a journal bound in blue leather, its pages filled with Cassian's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Serafina," the first entry began, dated the very night of their wedding. "I have acquired a wife through means no gentleman should countenance, yet I cannot bring myself to regret it. She stands with dignity despite circumstance, shows courage where others would falter, and possesses a beauty that owes nothing to artifice." Entry after entry chronicled their marriage from his perspective, his growing admiration, his surprise at finding pleasure in her company, his visits to Ronan where they discussed philosophy and literature. On the page dated the night of Pembroke's gathering, he had written, "I begin to fear our contract's end more than I have ever feared anything. The freedom I promised her now threatens to become my greatest punishment." The final entry, written just that morning, contained only a single line. "Today I shall learn whether a heart once purchased can choose to remain freely given." Serafina closed the journal, her fingers tracing the leather binding as her tears fell freely. The meticulous record revealed what words between them had never fully expressed, the gradual, inexorable transformation of duty into devotion. At precisely noon, she entered the East Garden where spring had coaxed a riot of blooms from winter-dormant earth. Cassian awaited her beside the reflecting pool, sunlight gleaming on his dark hair. He turned at her approach, vulnerability naked in his expression. "You came," he said softly, as though her presence were a gift rather than an obligation. "Did you doubt I would?" "I have doubted everything except my feelings for you." He gestured to a document resting on a small marble table. "Our contract, fulfilled to the letter. Your debts cleared, your brother healing, your freedom restored." Serafina approached slowly, her gaze fixed on the parchment that had bound them together and now would set them apart. "A most successful arrangement, Your Grace." "Cassian," he corrected gently. "Today I am not a duke making demands, but a man offering his heart." He reached inside his jacket, withdrawing a second document. This is not a contract, but a choice. It asks nothing of you save what you freely give. It promises nothing but my eternal devotion and all that I possess, material and immaterial alike. Serafina accepted the parchment with trembling hands. Where their original contract had been dense with legal terminology, this contained only a simple declaration of love and fidelity, without conditions or time limits. You once told me that though I might claim your body, your soul remained your own, Cassian continued, his voice gaining strength. I ask now not for ownership, but for partnership, not for duty, but for love. He sank to one knee before her, taking her free hand in his. Around them the garden held its breath, the wind stilled, the birds silent, as though nature itself awaited her answer. 1 month ago, I said, give me a son, and I shall free you, he recalled, his eyes never leaving hers. I spoke as a man who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. I did not understand then that true freedom comes not from absence of obligation, but from choosing one's bonds. From his pocket, he produced a ring unlike the heavy gold band that had sealed their contract. This one held a single emerald, surrounded by tiny pearls, green for her eyes, white for new beginnings. I release you from our bargain, Serafina, and all it entailed, he declared formally. And I ask, not as your creditor or your master, but as a man transformed by love. Will you stay not as my purchased bride, but as my freely chosen wife? Will you make me your prisoner forever, as I have already become in my heart? The moment stretched between them, pregnant with possibility. Serafina thought of the journal entries, of Ronan's recovery, of nights spent in tender embrace, and days filled with growing companionship. She thought of the cold, calculating Duke, who had demanded a son in exchange for freedom, and the vulnerable man who now knelt before her, offering everything with no guarantee of return. I arrived at Blackthorn as merchandise to be bartered, she said finally, her voice clear in the garden's silence. I would leave it as nothing less than its duchess in truth as well as name. Hope bloomed in Cassian's eyes. Is that a yes, my love? In answer, Serafina tore the original contract in half, the sound sharp and final in the hushed garden. Our arrangement is concluded, Your Grace, she declared formally. Then, her voice softening to tenderness, our marriage, however, is just beginning. The kiss that followed sealed not a contract but a covenant, witnessed not by solicitors and rivals, but by spring blossoms and the open sky. When they finally parted, Cassian pressed something into her palm, the key to the small chest she had discovered that morning. There is one more thing, he murmured against her hair. A wedding gift I should have given you from the beginning. That evening, as twilight painted Blackthorn's stone walls with golden light, Serafina followed her husband to the manor's west wing. He unlocked a door she had never entered, revealing a chamber illuminated by dozens of candles. At its center stood a cradle of ancient oak, carved with the Harrington crest and draped with linen of finest quality. This has awaited each Harrington heir for 12 generations, Cassian explained, his arm encircling her waist. I had it brought from storage the day after our wedding. You were that certain? Serafina asked, leaning into his embrace. I was that hopeful. He placed his hand gently over her abdomen, where their child, conceived in contract but to be born in love, grew secretly beneath her heart. The heir I demanded as my right, I now receive as heaven's blessing. How long have you known? She whispered, covering his hand with her own. Since Pembroke's gathering, he admitted. The physician confirmed my suspicion when Ronan fell ill, though he respected my wish to let you share the news when ready. Serafina turned in his arms, searching his face. And if I had chosen to leave today, then I would have loved you both from afar, and counted myself blessed for the month that made me human again. His fingers traced her cheek with reverence. But I dared hope that what began as duty might have become desire for you as it did for me. Not merely desire, she corrected, rising to her tiptoes to brush her lips against his. Love, Cassian. A love I neither expected nor sought, yet cannot now imagine living without. That night, as moonlight bathed their bed in silver glow, the Duke and his Duchess sealed their new beginning with whispered vows and tender caresses. No contract governed their union now, only the ancient unwritten covenant of two hearts that had found in each other not possession, but belonging. And as dawn broke over Blackthorn Hall, the shadow of transaction lifted fully from their marriage, leaving behind the radiant truth that what begins as obligation may, through grace and patience, transform into love's most perfect freedom. Spring yielded to summer, summer to autumn's golden splendor. Blackthorn Hall, once a monument to solitary grandeur, pulsed with renewed life as its gardens burst with color and its corridors echoed with preparations. The Duke's child would arrive with winter's first frost, according to the physician's predictions, a December heir for an ancient line. Ronan had recovered sufficiently to accept a position as Blackthorn's librarian, his scholarly mind finding purpose in cataloguing the family's extensive collection. On crisp October afternoons, Seraphina would often find her brother and husband deep in philosophical debate, their voices carrying across the lake where she walked to ease her increasing discomfort. "The Duchess appears particularly radiant today," observed Lady Montgomery during a small gathering to celebrate the harvest. The woman who had once cut Seraphina on Bond Street now courted her favor with shameless determination. "Motherhood clearly agrees with her." "Everything about her agrees with me," Cassian replied, with the easy confidence of a man secure in his happiness. His hand found Seraphina's beneath the table, their fingers intertwining in practiced intimacy. News of Lady Elizabeth's hasty remarriage, a foreign count with more title than fortune, had caused barely a ripple in their contentment. Lady Althea, however, had departed England entirely after her schemes were exposed, removing to a cousin's estate in the colonies where, according to correspondence, she found the society deplorably provincial and the eligible gentleman distressingly practical. The Tun, with its remarkable capacity for revision, had transformed the story of their union from scandal to romance. What had begun as whispers about a purchased bride evolved into sighs over the Duke's gallant rescue of a noble family fallen on hard times. Society chose to forget that Lady Vale had once been shunned, preferring the more palatable narrative of love triumphant. Only Cassian and Seraphina knew the full truth, how transaction had yielded to tenderness, how possession had become partnership. Each night he read aloud from the journal he still maintained, chronicling their journey from strangers to lovers to partners in creating both a family and a legacy. On the anniversary of their wedding, a day once marked for separation, Cassian presented Seraphina with a gift that brought tears to her eyes. The deed to her family's former estate, restored and renamed Vale Haven to serve as a sanctuary for gentlewomen facing financial ruin. "That no other woman should face the choice you did," he explained, as she examined the documents with wonder. "That no other family should be torn apart by circumstance when solution lies within reach." The sanctuary opened its doors as autumn painted the countryside in russet and gold. Seraphina, her condition now preventing travel, sent her brother as representative while she oversaw operations from Blackthorn. 5 families had already found refuge there, with more expected as winter approached. "You have created something remarkable," Ronan told her upon his return, his once gaunt face now healthy with purpose. "Father would be proud of how you've transformed loss into legacy." "It was Cassian's idea," she demurred, though the project had become her passion. "Perhaps," her brother acknowledged with a knowing smile, "but its heart is entirely yours." December arrived with swirling snow and biting winds that howled around Blackthorn's ancient stones. Seraphina felt the first pains as twilight descended, the child apparently determined to enter the world between day and night, between one season and the next, a fitting metaphor for parents whose own union had bridged transaction and love. The Duke, so composed in matters of business and politics, paced the corridor outside their chambers like a caged lion as the midwife and physicians attended his laboring wife. Each cry from behind the closed doors tested his legendary restraint until, unable to bear it longer, he burst into the room against all propriety and custom. "Sir, this is most irregular," the oldest physician protested. Cassian ignored him, moving directly to Seraphina's side and taking her hand. "I am here, my love," he murmured, brushing sweat-dampened hair from her forehead, "as I shall always be." "Your Grace," the midwife began, "gentlemen do not—" "This gentleman does," Seraphina interrupted between pains, her grip tightening on her husband's hand. "He stays." And so the Duke of Harrington, who had once demanded an heir as cold transaction, witnessed the miracle of his child's birth not as distant patriarch, but as involved father, supporting his wife through each contraction, whispering encouragement as she pushed, and weeping unashamedly when their daughter's first cry pierced the December night. "A girl," the midwife announced, her tone suggesting disappointment on the Duke's behalf. Cassian's face, however, reflected nothing but wonder as the tiny bundle was placed in his arms. "She's perfect," he whispered, cradling his daughter with reverent hands before placing her against Seraphina's breast, as perfect as her mother. They named her Aurora Elizabeth Vale Harrington, Aurora for the dawn she represented in their lives, Elizabeth to reclaim a name once associated with betrayal, Vale to honor Seraphina's lineage, and Harrington for the legacy she would one day inherit. "She shall have Blackthorn when the time comes," Cassian declared, as they watched their daughter sleep in the ancient cradle beside their bed. "I've already instructed the solicitors to amend the entailment. Our daughter shall not depend on marriage for security as so many women must." Seraphina leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion and joy mingling in equal measure. "You would break with centuries of tradition? Tradition confined us both until love broke its chains," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I would have our daughter know from birth what we learned through hardship, that true worth lies not in transaction but in transformation." Spring returned to Blackthorn, finding the Duke and Duchess walking the East Garden, where 1 year earlier they had torn a contract and written a covenant instead. Aurora slept peacefully in her mother's arms, her dark hair and green eyes already promising a beauty that combined the best of both parents. "1 year ago today, you made me the happiest of men," Cassian remarked, his arms secure around Seraphina's waist. "When you chose to stay not from obligation but from love." "And you, my love," she replied, "taught me that freedom is not the absence of bonds, but the privilege of choosing them wisely." She smiled down at their sleeping daughter. "Though I suspect neither of us realized quite how thoroughly we would become each other's willing prisoners." The Duke's laugh rang across the garden, startling a pair of nesting doves into flight. "Imprisonment has never felt so much like liberation," he agreed, bending to kiss first his daughter's forehead, then his wife's lips. "Perhaps that is love's greatest paradox, that in surrendering ourselves, we find ourselves most completely." As afternoon sun bathed Blackthorn Hall in golden light, the Duke gazed at his family with quiet wonder. Once he had demanded a son in exchange for freedom, believing himself the master of their transaction. Now, humbled by love's alchemy, he understood the truth that had transformed them both. In love's economy, the heart cannot be purchased, only freely given, and once given, it becomes not a possession, but a shared treasure, growing richer with each passing day. "Give me a son and I shall free you," he had once commanded. Life in its infinite wisdom had given him a daughter instead, and through her taught him that true freedom comes not from holding power, but from surrendering it to love's gentle authority. And in that surrender, both Duke and Duchess had discovered the most beautiful paradox of all, that in becoming each other's willing prisoners, they had found liberty beyond measure. What begins as transaction may, through patience and openness, blossom into transformation. The Duke sought an heir through cold contract, only to discover that the greatest legacy is not bloodline, but the capacity to evolve. Seraphina sacrificed freedom for family, only to learn that true liberty exists not in the absence of bonds, but in choosing them with wisdom and love. Their journey reminds us that life's most precious gifts often arrive disguised as obligations. That duty, embraced with integrity, can lead to devotion. That what we think we want, control, independence, power, may pale beside what we truly need, connection, vulnerability, love. The heart cannot be purchased, but it can be won through consistent kindness and unwavering respect. Pride may build walls, but humility opens doors to authentic connection. In yielding control, we sometimes gain something far more valuable, a partner who chooses us daily, not from compulsion, but from love. Perhaps the truest freedom is not independence, but interdependence, two souls dancing in harmony, supporting rather than possessing, enhancing rather than diminishing each other's essential nature. If this tale has touched your heart, remember, you are the storyteller of your own life. Each day offers the chance to transform transaction into transcendence, obligation into opportunity, control into connection. Subscribe for more tales that illuminate love's paradoxes and the heart's capacity for growth. Share in the comments which character's journey resonated most deeply with you. Was it Cassian's evolution from calculation to compassion? Seraphina's discovery that sacrifice could lead to salvation? Or perhaps Ronan, whose illness became the catalyst for healing of a different kind? Your stories and reflections matter. Join our community of hearts open to transformation, and together, let us explore the beautiful mystery of becoming each other's willing prisoners and finding, in that sweet surrender, our truest freedom.